Welcome to episode 3 of Prompt Me podcast. Today our guest is Stephen Fehr. He is an actor who's appeared in many plays and musicals, including Annie with Sally Struthers of All in the Family fame. And a little fun side note is she introduced him to his now husband. He's performed at Pioneer Theater, Salt Lake Acting Company, theater houses in California, and the Nevada Conservatory Company. He earned a bachelor's degree from Utah State University and later a master's from UNLV in theater performance. He's taught acting in universities and colleges, and a little bit of fun trivia, he was a contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. In this episode, we'll hear his process and what prompts him as an actor. So today on the podcast, we are welcoming Stephen Fehr, an actor, an acting teacher. Teacher.
And a relative.
And a relative. Yes.
A cousin.
A cousin. So I guess I'll just start off. What's your creative process when you are about to go into a role? Do you have a ritual? Do you have how do you?
Well, I'm a very intellectual person about my approach, and even when I went to school, I was learning that everything doesn't have to be intellectual. Like there's sensory ways of exploring stuff that I really had never taken into account before I went to graduate school. So I do use both, but I still rely on my intellectual first. I think that's where I start from. So if I'm cast in a play or a movie or whatever, I try to find out as much about that character as I can. Whether if it's a historical character, I try to do research on what that, who that character was. If it's a fictional character, the best place to start is to look through the script and see what other characters say about that character, and then also what that character says about themselves. So once I do that, then that's kind of the intellectual part. Then I'm like, okay, well, who is this character? How does this character walk? How does this character talk? How is this character different from me? And what things are similar with that character and myself? And the sensory part is, so when I went to graduate school, we did this movement-based process called the Lugering method, which was very like you would walk in a heavy way, or you'd walk in a light way, or you'd walk in a fast way or a slow way, and you'd talk that way. And there was no intellectual process involved in that at all. It was just about how does this feel in my body and what comes out of that. So I now that I have that process as well, I often use that too. So like even yesterday I had an audition, and the character is put in this position where he's feeling very panicky, and so a person like that is more liable to talk in a very fast, breathy, like I don't know what to do, that kind of thing. And so it's about finding what is the character experiencing, and how can I find that in my body, and how can I find that in my voice.
Wow, that is really cool. I've never really thought about the creative process as an actor.
Right.
That's not my medium. So that's really interesting to hear.
Creative interpretation.
Yeah. Well, and another thing, so I live in Las Vegas, and for a long time I worked at the MGM Grand, and people watching is really also a great tool that you can use, because I actually find in my process, whether it's acting, I also compose music, I also write a little bit. Observing the work or observing the actions of others is also very inspirational to me. We did a tour at the MGM Grand not too long ago where this guy came in, and he just had the weirdest energy and the weirdest voice and just way of behaving, and I just was fascinated by him. I was just like, someday I need to catalog what this guy's doing, put it in my brain, and maybe someday I'll be able to use it in a play or something.
So did you go home and try acting it out?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even go home. He was there, and then when I was out of his view and somewhere private, I was like, okay, how does he moving? And he just had this weird he just had this weird voice, and I'm just so pleased to be here.
Yeah.
It was just this interesting quality about him, and I just found it fascinating.
Do you ever find yourself collecting characters like that?
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of in the back of your head,
Oh, yeah.
You've got kind of a little drawer full of characters
Yeah.
you could pull out if you had to in an audition or something.
Definitely. No, I mean, really anybody can be inspiration for you. You can go to the mall and just watch all sorts of different people. And if you're playing a character who's very different from yourself, like I came from a middle class family, and if I'm playing somebody who's really, really poor, or who's had, maybe a street life that I have not experienced myself, or if I'm playing somebody very wealthy and elite, they carry themselves in a different way than maybe I carry myself. And so it's useful for me to observe other people and how they behave. You can see homeless people all the time, and somebody who may be suffering from mental illness or something, and you watch the way they move and the way they behave. I was driving to work the other day, and there was this homeless man, just very dirty, he looked like he'd had a really hard life, and he was talking to himself, and it's easy to look at that and go, oh, that's kind of frightening or scary, because that's not something I'm used to. But as an actor, I look at that and I go, wow, I wonder how this person got here. I wonder what circumstances caused this person to be here, and that's what you really need to find in any character you play, whoever it is the humanity of that character. And on the flip side, I'm watching really rich, wealthy people, with this kind of confident air that maybe I don't always have myself. It's like they own the world, and they go into a nice French restaurant that charges like $600 a plate, and that's not where I come from. And so if I ever have to play that kind of a character, I just need to know how do different people behave that's different than me.
Do you feel like taking on these characters gives you a new empathy for people in general, or does it also make you dislike some type of people?
I would say more of the former than the latter. Yeah. I find that every character that I play, even characters that maybe one might view as distasteful, teach me something. I played a schizophrenic in a play about, like 20 years ago. And as part of my research for that, I visited a mental health facility, and they were so kind to, it was a group of schizophrenic men who were willing to share their stories and share their experiences with this actor who just wanted to know more about what being schizophrenic was like. And I had preconceived ideas about what schizophrenia even was, and kind of this stereotypical idea of what schizophrenia is. And talking with these men and hearing their stories really opened up my mind to a new perspective about their point of view and where they're coming from. I always find too, it's always good not to judge your character. If you're playing somebody who's quote unquote evil, an evil person doesn't think they're evil. They think they're doing what they need to do, to get whatever they want. And so if you're in a melodrama where you're playing the typical baddie, that's different. But if you're playing an evil person, or somebody who's doing distasteful things, I think it's important to find their humanity and find, what are they doing good. One of the examples I would use, the television show Breaking Bad. Bryan Cranston's one of my favorite actors, and he managed to take this despicable character who just did terrible things, and yet you're you're seeing, like, he starts out doing the bad things that he does because he's trying to help his family out, you know? I mean, but then it becomes about power for him. But still, he does good things while he's being this really terrible person. And I like that whole idea of another character I love is, because I love the whole Star Wars series, there's a moment in The Empire Strikes Back where right at the end of the movie, Darth Vader's been trying to get Luke Skywalker this whole time, and we've just found out that, spoiler alert, that Luke is his son, and he, all throughout the movie, he's been killing anybody who doesn't do his bidding. He chokes them to death, and they have this moment where they're about to get the Millennium Falcon, they're about to get Luke Skywalker, and they escape, and you think, oh, he's going to kill the guy that's responsible for letting them go, because that's what he's been doing the whole movie. But instead, he just sort of sighs and then he just walks off. And I love that. I love that moment in the movie, because you're seeing the humanity of this character. You're seeing this person that you know, in the first movie, you just saw him as the stereotypical, he's the bad guy. And yet that's what the whole series of Star Wars is about, is the redemption of this evil person. You know, at the end, Luke Skywalker ends up saving him, you know. And that particular moment in The Empire Strikes Back is just a touching moment to me, where you see this black and white character suddenly become a little gray.
Yeah. Interesting. We should know Stephen is a super Star Wars fan.
Stephen is a nerd.
And it's awesome.
Yes.
I remember when we first met, he had the most, and probably still does, the most amazing collection of figures and
I do.
Paraphernalia.
I still have it.
So I say that in addition to everything you were just saying. Like, that's so good.
And also because John was a super Star Wars fan, too.
I thought I was. But Stephen beat me for sure. That's cool. Do you find, I'll start with the word easier. Do you find it easier to play characters that are a little more like you, or is it easier to play something totally opposite? Like something that's like 20% away from kind of who you are. Is that somehow a little tougher to find the subtlety?
I think one of... God, that's a hard question to answer. I think it's easy to do both in different ways. So for example, I was in this play called Intimate Apparel, which was about this Jewish man at the turn of the century, and him and this black seamstress have just a kind of a friendship, but it starts to develop into something more. But they realize they both can't act on that at this period in history. And at that same time, I was going through my own coming out experience and dealing with my feelings with my now husband, and the conflict that I was feeling at that time. And the character in the play he's just a very nice, gentle soul, which I think I am to an extent. And so I never felt like I was really acting in that particular role. I had like a Romanian accent, so he certainly wasn't the same. And, you know, he was Jewish and I came from a Mormon background, but there was a lot of real similarity between the two characters in my mind. And people said that they just thought I did such a great job in that play, and I never felt like I was acting. Like, I just felt like, well, I'm playing really a heightened version of myself. Yeah. And so that was like a compliment to me, that you don't have to act so much to give a good performance. Now, on the flip side of that, I've played characters that are diametrically different than me, and there's a real joy in playing those characters because they're doing things and they're saying things that you would never say or do in your own life. And so that also, maybe easy is not the word, but fun is the word, where I love playing characters. You know, I'm not a very angry person. It takes a lot to get me to to shout and yell at people, but like playing a character who's doing that, like there's some kind of release to it, because I'm like, oh, I never get to tell people off in real life, you know, and
Right.
and it's fun to do that. But again, the ease part is sometimes challenging because it isn't my nature to do that, and so I have to find that in myself. I'm like, okay, I'm not somebody who yells at people and calls them names and swears at people when I'm angry at them, but this character does that. So how do I find that in myself? And sometimes that goes back to what we were talking about observing other people, you know, like watching other people and how they behave and go, okay, that person is really good at yelling at people. So how can I bring that into my being?
Interesting. Yeah, because the flip side of that question would have been what's easier and which is more fun. And
Yeah.
your answer is kind of what I would suspect.
Yeah, I mean, I
total
like, for
opposites.
example, I really like playing villains because I don't view myself as kind of a villainous person. Like you know, I'm always trying to look out for people, and I'm always worried about hurting people's feelings and stuff. And, you know, you get up there and you play like a murderer, and you're like, wow, this is really, there's something, I don't know, there's something cathartic about like exploring that side of yourself. And, you know, even asking yourself, like, what would it take for me to kill another human being, you know? I mean, I certainly don't want to do that, but I was actually just listening to an audiobook about like the Vietnam War, and this guy's talking about his experiences of like having to kill people, and because that's such a foreign concept to me of like the desire to kill somebody or the need to kill somebody, and yet you as an actor may be cast in a role where you are a character that's at war, or you are a character who's killing somebody for money or whatever. And so somehow you have to find that quality in yourself, even if it's uncomfortable, to explore that. You know, how can I find the darkest elements of myself? Because we all have thoughts that go through our heads that we would never act upon. And as an actor, sometimes you have to take those thoughts and go, okay, well, what if I did act on that? What would happen? You know, how would this person behave? What would it do to them? So,
Right. And you hear stories of, you know, some actors get so far into it, it really brings them down.
right. And my process is very different. Like, I really can, you know, Anthony Hopkins, I think, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly, but he was just like, he would go, you know, people would talk about what a great actor he was. And to him, he was like, I just get up there, do my thing, say my lines, and then I go home, you know? And so you don't have to, I don't think you have to injure your own soul to play another person. That's why it's called acting. That's why it's called make-believe. And I think there are some actors that get so wrapped up in it that they actually cause injury, whether physically or mentally or emotionally, to themselves. And I personally don't work that way. Like, I know there's that separation of the character from myself. I will admit, though, you know, if you're in maybe like a heavy drama or something where it's very sad and stuff, it sometimes is hard to let go of that after you've, you know, you become so emotionally vulnerable that you still are hanging on to those kind of feelings, and it's kind of like you have to take a emotional shower to kind of wash that off of you and then go back to. And so what I try to do to kind of decompress is, you know, after the play or whatever the project is over, you know, I try to listen to music that's like really peppy, or I try to read or listen to something inspiring that kind of helps me like let those feelings go. But most of the time, in my process at least, I find that it's pretty easy to, once the curtain goes down or once the lights go out or once the camera stops rolling, that it's pretty easy for me to just go back to being who I already am.
Yeah. That sounds like the healthy way.
Yeah, I think so.
I had a question about the creative piece of, because you're a stage actor.
Yeah, primarily.
So there are lots of things that can happen when you're in front of an audience that could go wrong suddenly.
Right.
And so that kind of adds an extra step of creativity that you have to be able to pick up right in that moment.
Right.
So how do you deal with that? And do you have some examples of
I mean,
those situations?
I find you kind of have to ad lib, and you kind of just have to treat it like you would treat it in life. If something goes wrong in the script or something goes wrong in the production, what you really have to ask yourself is, how is this character going to respond to that? Because one of the things they really teach you in acting is to live in the moment, to live in whatever moment you are. So you're not thinking about what just happened. You're not thinking about what your next line is. You're trying to stay right in the present. And whatever that present moment is, even if it's something that isn't planned or scripted or something that goes wrong, you just need to stay focused on that. Now, that isn't always easy to do. It can be challenging. But I'll give you just a little example. So let's say a character has a prop. They have something they're holding. Maybe it's a piece of paper, it's a handkerchief, whatever. And the character drops it on accident. They're not supposed to drop it. What do you do when you drop something in life? What do?
You just pick it up?
Yeah, you just pick it up. Now, amateur actors will sometimes drop it and they'll just leave it there. They'll be like, "Oh, that's not the way it's supposed to go, but I dropped it. I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna ignore it." Well, now the audience is staring at that. They're like, "Is anybody gonna pick that, handkerchief up? Is anybody gonna pick that up?" There's nothing, even though it's not scripted that you have to pick it up because it wasn't scripted that it should be dropped. You as a human being would just go, "Oh, there's something on the floor that I need to pick up. I dropped it." So you just do that. So if a line comes out wrong or I was in a production of Clue based on the movie, and there's this part where all the characters, like they're gonna throw the key that has all the the key to the cabinet that has all the weapons in it, and they're opening the door and they're gonna throw the key out. And when they do that, they open the door and there's somebody standing there and all of them scream because this guy is there that they didn't expect, and then the play continues. Well, one night, the guy playing that role missed his cue. So we all open the door and there's nobody there. And of course, we're expecting to scream because that's what we were scripted to do. So we all open the door and we go, and then we just start ad-libbing, and the guy who played the butler, he's like, I think I see headlights, coming up the street. I'm gonna go explore, or whatever. And he went back there and got the guy and said, "Hey, you're missing your cue," Yeah. So you just have to do that. And I secretly, maybe I don't like it right when it's happening, but I secretly kind of like when things go wrong because there's a spontaneity and there's an energy that makes it fresh, that you're like, wow, we have to figure out how to barrel through this. Or I was in a production of it was a musical called Blood Brothers, and there's this one scene where one of the characters is giving another character some candy that he has in a bag. So the actor playing that character who had the bag of candy came out and the bag broke and all of the candy just is all over the floor. So we're doing the scene because we were playing like 8-year-old kids. And so what would a little kid do if a bunch of candy was on the floor? They'd be like picking it up and eating it. And that's what we were doing.
Trying to get the most of it.
And we're still saying the same lines that we had to say, but we were obviously saying it in a different way than we were scripted to say it because we had to, because that's what the moment asked for.
Yeah.
So you just have to, if you're embodied in that character, then whatever is thrown at you, whatever lines are missed, whatever, props are missing or whatever, you just have to roll with it as the character. And the danger that amateur actors make is that they're trying to deal with it as the actor. They're trying to be like, I don't know what to do here. What do I do? What's the next line? How do I do this? And you just have to be the character and go, okay, well, what would the character do if this situation went wrong? I mean, you have plays where guns are supposed to go off and they misfire. And it's like, okay, well, if this character's trying to kill this other character and the gun doesn't go off and they're supposed to die, what does that character do? I still have to kill this guy somehow, Okay, do I pretend to choke him and, he dies that way? Do I pretend to hit him with the gun? I mean, I have to do something to move the play forward, but the character still has to achieve his objective.
I was just finding it really interesting how embodied and in the moment that you have to be with this because, like I said before, this is not my art,
right.
This is not. And so to think about it, in so many ways, it almost sounds like this psychological, spiritual practice as well, because you were saying how you have to get in to the head of other people, you have to create empathy or find that humanity in them, and then to be 100% in the moment and be fully embody this character to where on stage, if something happens, you are that character.
Right.
It's like I just have never thought about that in that way, and I just think it's really interesting. And have you thought about it that way?
Well, I think what's interesting is one of the comments I get from people, and it's always well-meaning. It's always well-meaning, but it's also one that bothers me. So people, when they talk about, when you say I'm an actor, and they ask, what do you do for a living? I'm an actor, and they go, oh, that must be fun. And I'm like, it is fun, but it is work. And I think people, when you go to a play. Because a lot of the comments I get is, oh, how do you do all that memorization? Memorization is like the easiest part of acting. Like, if that is not the hardest part. Like, it's easy to memorize a bunch of lines. The hard part is getting the intentions. The hard part is getting the character. The hard part is getting the relationships between the characters and the vulnerability that's required to do things that you yourself might not do. And it can be very emotionally exhausting to, depending on what you're doing, whether it's a comedy, whether it's a drama. I mean, comedies are so high energy anyway that by the end you're exhausted. You're exhausted from doing it. At the same time, if you're in highly emotional scenes, like where you're crying a lot or you're yelling at each other or whatever, that's also very emotionally taxing. And at the end of the night, you're just like, I got to decompress. I got to go to sleep.
Yeah.
I got to, and so it is work. It's work to create that and to embody that and to do all the things that are necessary to do what an actor does. And I think people, when they go to the theater or they see a movie or something, and it's not their fault because they're not actors, but they don't recognize what is actually going into it, just from an emotional place, I guess.
Yeah, that's very enlightening for me to hear this. It's really interesting. On the prompting piece, because this is called Prompt Me Podcast, how do you prompt students or yourself to
start something, to embody a character? Like, I'm sure the acting classes you've taught have lots of different exercises.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Thanks.
That would involve
That's what I was looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have like a specific word in the case of that question, but what I do try to do, so I try to help my actors figure out how to move and how to speak in ways that are different than themselves. So we all have a certain way of walking, we all have a certain way of talking, we all have a certain way of thinking. And the challenge is to help an actor figure out how to use as much of their own body and their own voice to play as many characters, as possible. And so one of the exercises I do in class is I will have my students walk around the room, and I'll say, just walk around the space. Don't walk like in a circle. You're just walking through the space, and you're walking past each other, and you just keep doing that. And then I will throw prompts at them. I'll say, okay, I want you to walk in a really heavy way. How do you walk when you're really heavy? And I guarantee you, if you try this exercise yourself, if you walk in a heavy way for 10 minutes, you will actually start to feel maybe depressed, or you'll maybe start to feel like just this kind of slow, just terrible kind of feeling, depending on how you walk heavy. But on the flip side, if I tell you to walk light, I want you to walk in a very light way for the next 10 minutes. I don't have them walk that long, but or speak in a very light way for 10 minutes. You will start to feel like a higher energy. You'll start to feel better, and that's always what's interesting to me about it. Is there's nothing intellectual about that. I'm not saying think of your dying grandmother to get sad. You're just walking in a way that your body feel like you've walked in a heavy way, like when you're sad, and your body remembers that. And so if if I talk in a very light way and I'm just like, hey guys, how's it going? Like there's that energy about it that's already light, and I can find a happiness in that just from doing that. And so that's a prompt I give. Or sometimes we'll go in a more intellectual direction. So I'll have them walk around the room and I say, okay, I want you to walk around like you're a king, like you're royalty. Or I want you to walk around like you're a street thug. Or I want you to walk around like somebody of the opposite sex. Or I want you to walk around like you're an animal. Pick an animal. I don't care which animal it is. And so it just teaches them to move and talk in different ways that are different from how they do it themselves. And so that's one of the exercises I use.
Do you ever use that on yourself? Like if you wake up and you're like, oh, this is a rotten day. I feel awful. I don't want to do anything. Do you ever do these things?
No, I do. And this is an interesting question. So I just quit my job at the MGM Grand just a couple of days ago. And I had worked there for 6.5 years. And as part of my job, when I very first started working there, I was an usher. But they're called gatekeepers, and it's like a glorified usher. So we would play characters, and our job was not just to facilitate getting everyone seated and helping them find the bathroom or whatever, but also to play characters that kind of immerse them in this world of the show that we were doing. So when I very first got the job, we were told we could create our own character. We were given kind of an archetype. So my archetype was the artist at the time. That eventually changed to the musician. But I was given this archetype, and I was given a name, and the name was Draven. And so I asked myself, like, okay, what kind of character do I want to play? I have to go to this job every day. And so I want to pick something happy and light, and something that on days when I don't feel like going to work, like this character will force me to feel happy and optimistic and stuff. So the character of Draven was very like innocent and naive, and everything fascinated him. Like he was just so interested in everything, and he just was very happy and stuff. And like you say, there were some days when I just didn't feel great, like I was like, oh, I gotta go to work now, and then I get there, and then I would start playing this character, and my body just, I would become happier because this character was forcing me to, because I was doing things with my body and my voice that my body and voice already recognize as being happy. It's like, oh, well, psychologically he's not very happy, but he must be happy because he's, he's like, hey, everybody, it's really good to see you. I'm so glad you're here. It's that kind of energy. And so, yeah, it does work. Even when I was in Romeo and Juliet, and the characters had to cry because Juliet supposedly had died, and we were all sad, and I'm not always an actor that can cry on cue. Like I don't always have that ability to cry on cue. But if you put your body in a physical way, how you behave when you cry. So, I mean, you get like maybe a broken voice or whatever. And even though I'm not crying right now,
Yeah.
I know how my voice and my body behaves when I cry. And so I can still create that quality, and the audience may or may not pick up on the fact that it's not genuine tears, but I know how that feels to do that, and so I can still, and sometimes you even trick your body. Like if you get in that kind of pose, how you get when you do cry, you may actually start crying because your body thinks that's what's happening because it's so used to creating that.
Well, I have to say, when you just did that, I almost started crying.
See, and that's what I'm
like, oh my gosh, it's like
that's what I'm saying. And the fact of the matter is, I wasn't crying. I have no sad emotion right now.
Yeah.
It's just me knowing how it feels to cry and knowing what my voice and my body does when I cry. And then the audience just connects to that however they connect to it. In your case, you felt like crying yourself because I was doing something that, prompted that in you.
Yeah.
So that's really all an actor is doing. I mean, really, at the end of the day, an actor is just faking it. Like he's faking all these emotions. He's faking all these things. He may genuinely like feel that while he's doing it, but at the end of the day, acting is just a lie. You're just imagining all these things that you're doing. You're not actually playing or you're not doing the things that the character is doing. You're pretending to do those things.
Yeah. So
you're just good at it.
Yeah, very good at it. And it's like your tool to create emotion or experience for other people is yourself.
Right.
Whereas, John's tool is the keyboard or the guitar.
Or your tools
or
are the paintbrushes and the paints.
Yeah, so it's just a different tool.
My husband, sculpts. That's and he comes from a much different like I'm such a thinker. Like I think about, okay, I got to, again, it's because that intellectual part of me is so strong in me where I'm like, okay, I'm a pre-planner a lot of the times, which sometimes doesn't serve me as an actor. Because if you're supposed to be in the moment, if that's really the key to good acting, then pre-planning stuff isn't always serving you well.
Yeah.
But I think you have to have some sort of blueprint or ground plan, in order to deviate from it. Whereas my husband, when he's creating something, like he'll just start creating these faces, and I'm like, did you have that idea in mind when you started? And he's like, no, I just, I'm just sculpting it, and there it is, you know? And I find that fascinating because my brain doesn't work like that. Like I would have to sketch something out and then try to create it, whereas he can just start molding, and whatever comes out of that, that's what he's got,
Yeah.
Or he'll see something, like he'll see something in the store, he'll see all these disparate items, and he'll go, oh, I can make this and make this, and to me it all looks like just a mishmash of stuff.
Yeah.
But then he'll create something really beautiful out of it, and I'll go, I don't understand how that works.
Yeah.
So.
But you can create things with your acting,
right?
Like. I was almost in tears watching you fake cry. So, well, this seems like probably a good time to ask you if you can leave our listeners a prompt that could prompt whatever, as we were just exploring all these different art forms and even things that you might not consider an art form, like, baking or a dance. That is an art form, but gardening or whatever, So can you leave some sort of a prompt to let our listeners explore in their own way?
Just because it's really resonating with me right now, I would say dream big. Like dream big. Use that as your prompt. Like if you're already creating something, how can you how can you dream big and make it even better or bigger or more passionate or more fulfilling to you? That's what I would say.
I love it.
All right. Thanks again for listening. The prompt this time was Dream Big, which is an ambitious thing during this strange time when we're all probably living very small. But if you create something with it, be sure to hashtag PromptMePodcast so we can check it out. And until next time, stay safe.